Carbohydrates. Elements. Carbohydrates are biological compounds consisting of carbon bound to water, hence the name carbo for carbon and hydrate for water. Carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Monomers. Monosaccharides are the monomers that build larger carbohydrates. Monosaccharides are the simplest carbohydrates. They're the monomers that are used to build more complex carbohydrates. The most common of these are glucose, fructose, and galactose. Disaccharides are formed by combining two monosaccharides. Table sugar, or sucrose, is made up of glucose and fructose. Polysaccharides are formed by combining chains of many monosaccharides. Monosaccharides and disaccharides are also called simple sugars. Common names of sugars often end in ose, as in glucose. Triose is the general name for any monosaccharide with 3 carbons. Pentoses are 5 carbon sugars and hexoses are 6 carbon sugars. The basic roles of monosaccharides are as fuel to do work, a source of quick energy for cells, the raw materials for carbon backbones, and the monomers from which larger carbohydrates are synthesized. Fruits and some vegetables are natural sources of fructose and glucose. Monosaccharides have equal amounts of carbon and water. Most naturally occurring monosaccharides have 3 to 6 carbons. One way to write the general formula for them is C sub X H2O sub X. Carbohydrates have equal amounts of carbon and oxygen atoms and twice as many hydrogen atoms, so the general formula can also be written as C sub X H sub 2X O sub X. So possible formulas for monosaccharides are C6H12O6, C7H14O7, and C3H6O3. The most abundant monosaccharides are the hexoses, 6 carbon sugars, like glucose, fructose, and galactose. Disaccharides, like monosaccharides, are considered to be simple sugars. They're commonly found in our foods and they taste sweet. The ability to taste sweetness is an adaptation that helps animal species. Sweetness sends a signal to the brain's reward center and becomes associated with quick energy. The bonds that hold monosaccharides together are called glycosidic linkages, circled in red, and have the pattern carbon-oxygen-carbon. Disaccharides are formed by dehydration synthesis reactions that combine 2 monomers and release a water molecule. The diagram shows 2 glucose molecules that are joined by dehydration synthesis. The products are the disaccharide, maltose, and water. The new glycosidic linkage is circled. Maltose is derived from grains and gives the beer flavor. Sucrose and lactose are additional examples of disaccharides that are common in our diet. Sucrose is the most abundant disaccharide on Earth. It is table sugar, a dimer of glucose and fructose, and the sugar circulating in plants. The sugar circulating in animals is glucose. Lactose is the sugar in milk and a dimer of glucose and galactose. Lactose intolerance is a common human condition, especially in adults. Lactose intolerance is a genetic trait that results from the decreased production of lactase, the enzyme that speeds up the hydrolysis of lactose. Hydrolysis reactions break down larger molecules and require a molecule of water. One product gains a hydrogen atom, the other gains an OH group. The 2 products are smaller than the reactant. Polysaccharides are polymers of glucose. Different monosaccharides are linked together using dehydration synthesis reactions to form several different polysaccharides. The 3 most important polysaccharides are starch, cellulose, and glycogen. The main functions of polysaccharides in plants are storing energy and building rigid structures. Both functions are pictured in these potato cells. The starch grains are for long-term energy storage. The cellulose cell walls are the rigid structures that retain cell shape. People need both types of plant polysaccharides in their diets. While glycogen, starch, and cellulose are made up of the same monomer, they vary in the type of glycosidic linkages that hold the glucose monomers together. Polysaccharides can be formed from thousands or millions of monomers, and complexes of them can be so large that they are visible under low-power microscopes. For example, it's possible to see starch grains and cell walls in potato cells at 100 times magnification. Starch is used for long-term energy storage in plants. A starch can be unbranched or branched. Amylose is shown in both configurations and contains 300 to 600 glucose molecules. Cellulose is a carbohydrate used to make cell walls in plants. Cellulose has a different kind of bond between glucose molecules, forming chains that are cross-linked by hydrogen bonds. These bonds make a very strong substance. Animals lack the enzyme that breaks the glycosidic linkages in cellulose, breaking it into monosaccharides used for energy. In human diets, cellulose is undigestible dietary fiber. It provides no energy, but is helpful in the digestive system process. Some animals, such as grazing animals and termites, have intestinal bacteria that can break down cellulose. These bacteria have evolved the necessary enzyme and provide glucose for their host. Grazing mammals and their intestinal bacteria have evolved together and have adaptations that help one another. Glycogen is a highly branched polysaccharide made by animals, fungi, and some bacteria. Glycogen is used for medium-term energy storage in animals. It is stored in the liver as a source of blood glucose. In muscles, it provides a local supply of energy when needed. During workouts, human bodies keep functioning because glucose is being released from glycogen and is circulated to every cell in the body. In order for humans to obtain usable energy from glycogen stores, it must first be broken down into glucose molecules. When energy is needed, a reaction releases glucose from the ends of polysaccharide chains. The reaction is similar to a hydrolysis reaction. The phosphate group on glucose will be removed in a later reaction. Sugars all have many polar hydroxyl groups in their structure. That makes them very hydrophilic, which means to attract water. Simple carbohydrates are soluble in water and body fluids. For example, glucose circulates in blood and sucrose circulates in plants. Although glycogen and cellulose are not soluble in water, and glycogen is poorly soluble, water molecules are attracted to their structures. Carbohydrates in diagrams can be identified by the following characteristics. They're made up of only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The carbon to oxygen ratio will be close to 1:1. Their names often end in -ose. Pentoses, which are 5 carbon sugars, and hexoses, 6 carbon sugars, often exist as ring structures. Here we have the carbohydrate diagrams for erythrose, cellulose, and maltose. Starch is an energy source made by plants. Glycogen is an energy source made by animals, fungi, and bacteria that's stored in liver and muscles. And cellulose is made by plants in its structural cell walls and dietary fiber. These are the functional groups that are involved in carbohydrates: hydroxyl and carbonyl. R represents any carbon-containing molecule. Property: hydrophilic, polar, increases a molecule's solubility in water, found in alcohols. Here is ethanol. This carbonyl group is found in many biological molecules. It's polar and has many functions in biological systems. It's found in testosterone and estradiol.